So it seems like the entire world is against Amber Heard. And I mean, there are inconsistencies in her story, but in today's video, I want to focus on her witnesses because she's been able to bring in a handful of people to give testimonies under oath, which means if they lie, they commit perjury, which is illegal. And I know that a lot of people are on Johnny's team, and I totally understand that, but I think it's important to look at the bigger picture. And I've made a video going through a timeline of their entire relationship, and then I've made a few videos calling Amber out on her lies. In today's video, I don't want to push any opinion onto you guys. I simply want to put together a compilation of a bunch of different testimonies from her witnesses that claim that Johnny did do some things or said some things, and that brings us to our first witness. His name is Tillet Wright, and he is a friend of both Johnny's and Amber's, and he claims at their wedding he heard Johnny tell Amber that now that they're married, he can hit her and nobody can do anything about it. That's obviously not a good look, and interesting that he heard it. He overheard it at the wedding. But Tillet also testifies that he heard an altercation between Johnny and Amber on May 21st, 2016. He claims that Johnny was being threatening towards Amber and that it prompted him to call 911.
She and I thought it was funny, and he started to get more and more agitated, and I could hear him walk away from the phone. He came clomping back down the stairs, and I heard like a noise, and then the phone dropped, and he said to her, "Oh, you think I hit you? You think I fucking hit you? What if I peel your fucking hair back?" And then I heard the phone drop again, and then I heard her scream. I remember her screaming. And I hung up the phone, and I called Raquel immediately because I know that she lives one door away, and her and her boyfriend Josh, who's a big dude, would be able to get there the fastest. And I called her, texted her right away, and I hung up with her and immediately called 911 in New York. And then I called a friend of mine in LA who I knew had met Amber a number of times, and I think I may have placed a second call to NYPD. Now I'm all frazzled and I don't remember.
Before we go any further, again, I want to stress that these are Amber's witnesses, people that she has brought in. So I'm not trying to push, again, some certain narrative. I think that we have defended Johnny enough in some of my previous videos, but I do want to share what her friends have to say. And maybe they're her friends. Maybe they're just, supporting their friend and, doing everything in their power to help her case. But at the same time, it's just like, it's so hard because I want to cover everything, but I don't want you guys to think that I'm pro one way or the other. Nonetheless, we need to move on to our next witness, who is one of our most interesting witnesses. Her name is Raquel Pennington, and she is a very close friend of Amber's. We've heard about Raquel multiple times in court, so she's an important person in this story. Raquel testifies to seeing Amber's face red and swollen, and that Amber's hair was ripped out of her head back in December 2015, which you guys may remember there was an altercation that went down. Supposedly, allegedly, Johnny got physical with Amber. Then Amber appeared on the James Corden show shortly after, which doesn't really make sense because she claims she was so beat up the day before, but then she went onto the show and she doesn't look bruised. But we've heard from makeup artists and all of that, and we'll get to that part. But here's Raquel's testimony.
She asked me to come over to her residence, PH3 or PH5, I don't remember which one I entered. And she was very upset. Her face was red, swollen. The hair had been ripped out of her head. I went through all of the penthouses. She didn't cancel. I don't think I even slept that night watching her just to make sure she didn't.
Is that because you were worried she had a concussion?
Yes.
Why did you tell her that you were going to go take pictures throughout the penthouses?
Why wouldn't I?
Raquel also mentioned in her testimony that she knew that Amber would use makeup to cover up her bruises, which, I mean, I guess that would make sense because if she goes on to the James Corden show, like right after this situation, she's gonna have to use some makeup.
Paint on bruises or use makeup to make it appear as if she had a bruise when in fact she didn't? To your knowledge?
No, the opposite.
What do you mean when you say the opposite?
She often had to cover bruises and injuries on her face with makeup.
Did you see her cover bruises on her face with makeup?
Yes.
Now let's move on to May 2016, because there was another altercation that Raquel was a part of. She claims that she heard Johnny yelling at Amber in their penthouse and that she went and shielded Amber with her body to protect her from Johnny. I actually remember hearing that Johnny's like bodyguard came in and he saw that Johnny was like 20 feet away from Amber. So there are some conflicting testimonies when it comes to that. But Raquel actually had a fiance at the time, and he has also testified in this case. And he's claiming that he also saw those bruises and the swelling and everything that went down back in December 2015. Again, the incident right before the James Corden show.
Let ourselves in to go check, saw that written on the counter, saw the kitchen a miss. Raquel looked at me and said specifically, go back to our place. I'm gonna go check on her, bolted upstairs. I was sitting over in PH1 in our apartment, waiting, and I heard from her, again, I don't remember exactly, I wanna say it was about 10 or 15 minutes later. I really don't remember what my response was. I don't remember what transpired after that, other than there was some time that she was over there. I don't remember when or even if Melanie came over at any point during that evening.
What do you recall about that?
And I remember it specifically because she had pretty significant visible facial injuries and didn't know if she was going to be in a state to do it or didn't know whether she was even going to have the physical appearance to be able to do it.
Okay, when you say these things, first of all, she in those statements is Amber Heard, correct?
Yes.
Did you see Ms. Heard's face that day?
Yes.
Do you have good vision?
I didn't have glasses and I didn't need them then, so yes.
So I'm handing you a document that was marked as through 11. You can see from the top page it was attached to Ms. Heard's affidavit declaration as Exhibit 13. And I want you to look at the photos of Ms. Heard's face and tell the jury, Mr. Drew, if those were consistent with what you observed on her face that day.
It is. I was with Raquel when she took the pictures.
So you guys just heard from Josh Drew, who again was Raquel's fiance at this point. And he claims back in December 2015 that he saw the injuries. He also was there in May 2016. He testified that Johnny bursted into the penthouse he was staying in on May 21st, 2016, and that Johnny made a beeline for him and was screaming and cursing and spitting at his face.
Like 10 or 15 minutes before I heard a door open in the hallway. And then a couple seconds later, I heard a really, really loud slam, which I later learned was a wine bottle being smashed into our door, PH1. And then I heard keys jingling and Johnny shouting at one of his security to open this. Is it right if I swear? I mean, I'm telling you here. That's okay.
You should say the words exactly as they were said.
As I remember, he said, open this fucking door, get me in here. And he came in, caught eyes with me right away, and beeline for me, screaming, cursing, spitting in my face. I walked calmly to leave, realized that I'd forgotten my keys and the dog, so I turned around and walked back to go get both. He stayed and followed with me, walking, pacing, screaming, cursing, spitting in my face, and I left calmly. At that point, Liz was still in the apartment, and the last look I saw of her is that she bolted around the corner and went upstairs to hide from him.
Had Mr. Depp ever done this to you before?
No.
Did he? How close was he to you when he entered your apartment and was screaming at you?
Close enough for it to be aggressive.
Was it a foot?
Yes.
Now let's move on to Amber's sister, Whitney, because she had the fastest testimony deposition. That was the fastest one I've ever seen before, and she was quick with it. And honestly, I felt like her way of speaking compared to Amber's is so different. Amber is so theatrical, and Whitney just kind of seems like she's straight up yeah, I did the cocaine with Johnny. Yeah, I did this. But I want to mention a snippet where she testifies that pretty much Amber's medical treatment and therapy were controlled by Johnny, which is something I was kind of taken back on. I was why is this even being brought up right now?
Respect to Mr. Depp with respect to Amber's health.
Sure. All of a sudden, for really unclear reasons, Amber had her own personal nurse just administering medication, and from what I saw, it was strange. I didn't think Amber needed, medication on the daily or whatever. And then all of a sudden, she has a therapist that is employed by Dr. Kipper. Even her medical treatment was somehow controlled by or paid for by Johnny.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation with respect to the control. Was to control, but paid for. I'll go ahead.
The biggest incident that Whitney was a part of was back in March 2015. And pretty much she claims that Johnny swung for her, which caused Amber to retaliate and to protect her sister. And it all got physical. Let's go back to that incident that happened in May 2016, because Raquel has a friend named Elizabeth, and she actually witnessed some of this incident. She said that she saw Johnny supposedly aggressive, and that however he was acting made her scared. She was fearful of him.
Then, soon after, the door slammed open and Johnny came bursting through the door.
Who opened the door?
Johnny.
Okay. Was Johnny alone?
There was the two men behind him.
Okay.
Following him.
So Johnny opens the door. He's got his two, what we'll assume are his bodyguards, with him. What happens next?
So it all happened very fast. The door kind of burst open and he came in very, just from my perspective, really under the influence of something, drugs or alcohol, because he was very sloppily, he looked wasted. He was holding a very large bottle of wine, looked like some sort of a Magnum bottle of wine, which was kind of spilling all over the place. And as he opened the door, he just, what he mumbled was, "Get your bitch out of here." And I just remember it all happened very fast, the door slamming, him saying, "Get your bitch out of here," the wine, that whole, his whole being really frightened me. It almost felt like he was coming towards me from my perspective. Whether he was coming towards me or not, it scared me. And I just ran out past him.
That Johnny charged at you and then you were scared.
He charged towards me and I was scared. I ran past him.
You didn't run past him because he told everyone in that penthouse to get out of his penthouse?
I ran past him because he ran into the unit and it scared the shit out of me because he was wasted and screaming. So that's why I ran out. If there's a grown-ass man coming at you and saying, "Get your bitch out of here," and swaying a Magnum-sized bottle of wine, I'm sure, I don't know what anyone do. I can't say what anyone do, but
Elizabeth also testified that she has seen some of the injuries on Amber's face, which is interesting that we have there's not that many Amber has her pictures, but you guys know that there have been some issues with some of those photos. But it's interesting how many people had seen these injuries, and yet why are they difficult to prove? I don't know why people even question them, but here's what Elizabeth has to say.
On May 21st, 2016 was in Penthouse 1. What do you recall seeing, the first thing you saw when you saw Ms. Heard?
I just remember she looked really upset and disheveled, and her hair was a mess, and she had a swollen face. Red. She had a red, swollen face.
Okay. Had you ever seen Ms. Heard cry before May 21st, 2016?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember.
Okay. What side of her face was swollen?
I think it was her right side of her face.
Do you have an independent recollection that it was the right side of her face that was swollen?
I'm taking myself back there and trying to remember like where I was standing versus, you know what I mean? I think it was, I think looking at her, it was on my left and her right side.
Now let's talk a little bit about Amber's makeup artist. Her name is Melanie, and she was the person responsible for covering Amber's face with makeup to hide the bruises and the swelling and to help her look presentable out and about.
Please describe for me what you observed about Amber Heard's face and any injuries.
When I came to the penthouse on December 16 to do Amber's makeup, she had injuries. She had two light, like, I don't know how, I don't know, I mean, I'm not a medical expert, I don't know how I would describe them, but it could have looked like somebody had headbutted her lightly, so she had a discoloration here, under both eyes, and on the bridge of the nose. And she had what I would call a split lip or something on the lip, like a gash or a split lip.
Ms. Iglesias, I'm going to ask you to look at what has been marked as exhibit number 11. Do you recognize this photo as being Amber Heard's head?
Yes.
Okay. And could you please describe for me what this photo is showing?
It's showing a chunk of missing hair.
And what, if anything, did you observe on December 16 about Amber Heard missing a chunk of hair?
I remember this because she showed it to us.
Honestly, I have a few additional questions for Melanie. Like, how did you know that was Amber's head? And just, there are certain things that she said, I was like, well, the color, like, you just used a little peach, like, concealer? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's okay, but I mean, it is powerful for Amber to have this person's testimony, and she was all up in Amber's face, and she saw the marks, the bruises, whatever they were. So, you know, you just have to, I mean, she's under oath. You would assume that she's telling the truth here.
What you did by way of makeup to prepare Amber Heard for the James Corden show on December 16, 2015.
Yes, we covered, you know, I just did makeup, but just a little heavier where it needed. So we covered, you know, the discoloration, the bruises with a little slightly heavier concealer, one that has a little more of a peach undertone, which I would normally don't use on Amber, but peach do cancel blue. So I did that under the eyes, and although Amber always, you know, has a red lip, is one of her signature look, I remember clearly talking that we had no other option that night but then to use a red blood, like a really red lipstick to, you know, make sure we could cover up the injuries on the lip.
And were you able to cover all of the injuries with the makeup that you applied and as you just described?
Yes.
I do find it interesting how Melanie claims that she used a little heavier concealer, because you would think that she would like pack on the makeup, or at least she would make it seem like she was. Now let's talk about Amber's acting coach. Her name is Christy Sexton, and she testified that Johnny didn't want Amber going out and working on her own.
I would hear them fighting and then hear her come in, and she would be a wreck after she came in. I couldn't make out what they were saying, and I personally wasn't trying to listen to their fights, so I would just hear the sounds of the screaming. And her usually, you could tell she would open the door and try to get him to be quiet, and then it'd go back to him yelling. And so that would directly occur before she would come down and be upset and trying to pull herself together.
What do you recall seeing her today? She told you that they were fighting about.
I was witness to some of those. He didn't want her going out without any sort of security or any team. He didn't want her going and doing things just on her own.
You described earlier in your testimony, Ms. Sexton, what Amber Heard was like when you first met her. During this period when she was involved with Mr. Depp, and particularly toward the end of their relationship, did her behavior change?
Over the course of time, she became more and more of a hermit, only leaving the house when she had to. Again, as I said earlier, literally the houses became darker with the curtains drawn all the time. I remember one time in particular when she was living at the Eastern Columbia that we went downstairs to get a slice of pizza. I think there were 4 of us, and Amber gave a homeless kid down there some money, and we helped him get to the bus stop, and we came back up, and Johnny yelled at her about going out, and that she knew better than to be going out at night and that kind of thing. And when we tried to kind of be like, it's fine, we got pizza downstairs at the building across the street, then he just started screaming and getting really angry. So I made my way out.
Christy had also supposedly seen an incident between Amber and Johnny. She said that she saw Johnny pretty much go after her, and she was so scared in that moment, she was shaking.
I saw him coming at her, and that's when the bodyguard stepped in, like coming towards her. But I did not, like, so throwing himself at, like, but I was not witness to him throwing objects at her.
When you say he was coming at her, are you describing the incident at Sweetser or at the penthouse?
Sweetser, he came in through that hallway, and we were sitting at, it was kind of like an island there, like right in front of the fridge, and I was in front of the fridge, and he came in from there, was like coming at her, and then the bodyguard, like came in and scooped him up.
This is the incident. You don't remember what Mr. Depp was yelling about, or
yeah,
what?
Yes.
But it appeared to you that Mr. Depp was coming at Ms. Heard.
Yeah,
correct?
She was shaking and upset. It felt like something that had been going on for a while.
Now let's talk about this guy named Bruce. He's actually Johnny Depp's former brother-in-law, but he claims in March 2013 that he did in fact see a bruise on Amber's arm. Now let's switch gears a little bit, because I think it's so interesting how like a therapist will come and testify in court, because you know there are HIPAA laws, but then when you have cases like this, you know, HIPAA doesn't matter anymore. And this therapist saw both Amber and Johnny, and she claims that she did see bruising in pictures and in person. So there's another, like, I guess, valid testimony. If this like psychologist therapist has seen it, you would hopefully be able to trust someone who works in the medical field like this.
Somewhere around the time she got the injury, I know she came in person to show me.
Did she show you photos, or did she show you?
Both.
You said she showed you photos, and so is it your testimony that she showed you photos of her injuries shortly after the alleged event?
Somewhere in the period while she still had injuries, she showed me photos, but she also came in and showed me in person.
And what did she show you in person?
Bruising on her face.
What's interesting about this therapist, Dr. Anderson, is that she was actually there for Johnny, but there were certain things that she said that didn't make Johnny look that great. Like she testified that Johnny told her that Amber gave as good as she got in their fight. So he was open about his fights with Amber to her. So those are all of the testimonies I wanted to share with you guys. There was one person who testified. Her name is Ellen Barkin, and she had an intimate relationship with Johnny Depp back in 1994. Like, why is she here? Why is she here? But I guess she threw a bottle, or Johnny threw a bottle at her at some point, and I guess this is supposed to prove that Johnny could, if he threw a bottle to, sweet Ellen, then, why wouldn't he throw one at Amber? Ultimately, this entire court case has me stomach sick. I just feel stressed out. I feel like I can imagine how they're feeling. Like, screw my feelings. How are they feeling? And I worry about how this affects our society and just like how, victims coming forward. And what does this mean for people? I mean, it's scary on both sides. And what Johnny has gone through publicly and what Amber's going through publicly, honestly, nobody really deserves that. But I want to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Here's my email if you guys have any other video ideas for me. Thank you for watching this entire video. If you made it to the end, comment below, and I'll see you guys in a new one soon. Bye, guys.